Hello, everyone. This is Ari and Salimi, and you're currently listening to Bass Tunes, the first episode. All right. Now that that's out of the way, we're going to go ahead and put on something a little bit less distracting vocally. There you go. So, you might be able to tell by the broadcast, but we're talking about Koi no Yokan by Deftones. It's their 7th studio album, releasing about 2 years after Diamond Eyes. Now, Diamond Eyes was a pretty big album for their discography because it marked the change in bassist from Chi Chang to Sergio Verga. Now, the reason why this happened was very unfortunate. Unfortunately, bassist Chi Chang got into a bad car accident and was left in a coma before passing away. They were actually going to put out an album in 2008 called, I believe it was something around the lines of Eros. And, they were talking about, it's going to be the dark side of the moon of KUCI, whatever. Not KUCI. The dark side of the moon of alternative metal, which is the main genre that they tend to stick to, right? They started out originally as nu metal, which is this sort of pastiche late 90s mixture of aggressive metal mixed with hip-hop rapping. Limp Bizkit, Korn, Linkin Park, those types of things. And not like there's anything wrong with those bands or anything, but Deftones, aside from their first album, Adrenaline, they really quickly began to shift away from that label. To a big extent, actually. And, they really achieved that fully, in my opinion, with their third album, White Pony. But we're not talking about White Pony, are we? No, we're talking about their 7th album, Koi no Yokan. Just to get a little bit of background info, I deemed it worthy. So, what defines this album? In my opinion, Koi no Yokan is defined as their dreamiest album. Now, for the entirety of basically their career, ever since their second album, Around the Fur, Deftones have really operated on this really weird spectrum of different musical ideas as an alternative metal group, taking in elements from electronic, shoegazing, harder metal, hip-hop, although maybe to less of an extent than their other stuff, influences, take all of that and mash it into something very distinctive to theirs. This intimacy, the main thing with their whole thing is that jump from quiet verses, these claustrophobic, the main vocalist, Sheena Moreno, crooning on the mic, whispering right in your ear, and then erupting into just a blast of screams, power, all of that stuff, right? And this is done quite well on Koi no Yokan, but it definitely takes a softer turn than something like White Pony or their 4th album, which is their self-titled Deftones. As I said previously, the closest thing album-wise from the discography that I can compare to is Saturday Night Wrist, which also took this some more mellower, softer, more textural look at their music, right? And one thing I actually found interesting is the album covers actually share the same font. Now, that might give a little bit of, hey, that might be the same thing, Obviously, they're not totally the same, but, they're similar enough. So, how's the presentation? How is the overall flow of the album? I think that's a really important thing when you're looking at an album as I'm going to sit down and listen to it all the way, Now, a lot of people nowadays, they're really into just picking out a couple songs they really like, slapping it on their playlist on whatever streaming service they use, shuffle it. They're more of a singles-based thing, especially with streaming. We got albums like the Migos' later discography, Drake's later discography, these large hip-hop artists who really just dump a bunch of songs onto an album just to game the system. More likely to get streams, more songs, more likely to get more streams. One of them is more likely to be added to a playlist. Quantity over quality. Koi no Yokan, by contrast, doesn't do that. It's 11 songs, 52 minutes. It is just a smack in the face each time. The opener kind of shifts the mood a little bit to what you might expect from the rest of the songs. Swerve City was the song I played at the beginning. That was the song. And that song is probably the most aggressive in terms of the entirety of the song. It's intense, it's loud, and I just love that grinding. I believe it's an 8-string guitar riff. The drums, it's great. Mixing wise, I would say the entire album is a bit, shall we say, compressed compared to their earlier stuff, which is alright, but it's definitely a lot more processed. It seems that they got them some new equipment that allowed them to better sequence it in terms of like, oh, we're gonna record this part and then that part and do that all separately. Obviously, it still sounds organic and real, but it feels a little bit more produced, a little bit more composed, less raw from the studio energy, which is something that you may or may not like. I'm not sure personally. I think both work, but they're very different types of sounds. And one thing I also noticed is the classic snare that you might have heard on something like Around the Fur White Pony, not nearly as good. The drum tones on those albums were so recognizable to me. Something similar that I might be able to recognize is something like Weezer's Blue Album. Yeah, I'm talking about Blue Album, sue me. That kick drum, it is so damn recognizable. But yeah, the album essentially just sort of takes shifts from quiet to loud to more textural, long-form anthems and that build on top of each other. The songs like Entombed even incorporate digital drums instead of physical drums, you know, for like the, I guess the verse is to be. I guess the verse, right? I guess you call it a verse. And there's like these long, just filling anthems. And a lot of the lyrics to me seem, while, yeah, the majority of them are spoken in second person to a you, and usually, as far as I can tell, romantic or intimate in nature, as is the majority of Deftones' discography. A lot of it's also quite empowering. The song is in the background right now is Leathers, and the hook essentially goes, shedding your skin, showing your texture, time to let everything inside show. Cutting all ties, now and forever. This is your chance. Revolt. Resist. Now, obviously, he's screeching those lines. I don't have the vocal capacity. Well, I can scream. But more specifically, I don't really have the ability to do that without severely frying my vocal cords, which is not something anyone wants to do, right? But I guess I like these long-form anthem tracks. You know, example like Entombed or Rosemary, or I guess Poltergeist might be kind of one of those. But my favorite songs on this album are the more aggressive, classical, hard-hitting ones. So my favorite songs, you know, I have a guest on, and his opinions are probably going to differ very much so to mine. But my personal favorites were Swerve City, the opener, Leathers, Graphic Nature, and Gods. And those aren't just the most hard-hitting, I'm gonna punch you in the face type stuff. They really do have this good, soft to quiet, textural, and, you know, all-encompassing and beautiful with just power and aggression. And that's what really sells the majority of their discography to me. That mix between intimacy and just open arena, empowerment and insecurity, hatred and love. It's all very intense. And that's what you really gain out of an alt-metal band like Deftones. Their discography is consistent. So it's kind of a positive and a negative. You know, I don't really think they're going to put out something that's just going to like absolutely top White Pony anytime soon. But I sincerely think that every album they put out, with maybe a couple of exceptions, at least an 8 out of 10. They come out every few years, they put out something new. Their sound is sort of pretty similar to each other, but shall we say very, well, unique. They're unique, but they don't really change much in the grand scheme of things. Over time, they definitely have. I mean, you take a look at Adrenaline to this, but their core ideas are sort of the same. And that's all right. But guess what? We have a guest. We got my man Ethan in the building. So I'm going to turn him on right now. And hello, Ethan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Arian.
Yeah, I know. Because you're here with me. So I had you listen to this entirety of this album. What'd you think of it overall?
Overall, I give this album probably an 8.5 out of 10 because it seems right down my alley with this alt-metal, alt-rock form.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, rating's one thing, obviously. Rating is one thing. But, one thing you might have noticed from listening is I haven't given a rating. Actually, no. That's a total lie. I apologize. But that's not the main important thing. What were some specific qualities about... what's your favorite song off it, first off?
My favorite song off this album, off Koino
Yokan. It actually means anticipation of love when translated from Japanese. But go on. What is it?
My favorite song off this album is Rosemary.
Why is that?
I just like the change between Gauze and Rosemary on the album, and I really love the guitar riffs and the bass line in Rosemary.
Yeah, I see why you'd like that, What's your least favorite song, if you had to pick one?
Probably Tempest.
Why is that? I kind of like that song. It's kind of it's a long-form endeavor for sure, but I'm curious.
Throughout the album, I feel like the groove going through, it kind of hits a plateau with Tempest.
Yeah, I get that. And that's the one thing I could definitely criticize Deftones in general from their discography, depending on certain albums, is that when you have a unified sound, it gets stale after a while, honestly. Like, this is a long album. It's kind of just a beatdown. Like, I love the composition where every song ends, there's no dead space, immediately onto the next. There's no breathing room on this album, which is both a positive and a negative. Would you agree with that, or would you disagree?
I would agree with that. But the album does have some really good, has some hidden gems in it.
What's a hidden gem? Because my favorite track is kind of a hidden gem. It's Graphic Nature. But what's yours? I mean, I already know your favorite track. But what's a hidden gem you think?
I would say the hidden gem in this album is probably Romantic Dreams.
That one's interesting. Yeah, the lyrics are probably the most blunt and direct out of that sort of, romance angle of the Deftones, I guess, mythos, especially in this album. I feel like their music is sort of abstract, but not that abstract in terms of lyricism. But, it's some of it's his real ideologies and, experiences. Like, for example, the song Mascara Around the Fur. That was actually written about his ex-wife, and his lyrics like, I hate your tattoos, you have weak wrists, but there's something about her long shady eyes. I'm all about her shade tonight. And the ending of that, oh my. All right, that's actually one of my favorites. So the ending of Mascara, that last riff, will pummel you in the gut, man. It's too bad you're married. To me. But, that's not this album. So, you think you're going to check out some more Deftones stuff?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you've checked some of their stuff out before, haven't you? At least as far as I can tell from my conversations with you.
Yes, I really liked White Pony.
Yeah, that's my favorite one, probably.
Yeah, I'm really into that metal punk scene, and especially with this kind of era of music with Deftones, Rise Against, and A System of a Down.
Yeah, I get that. All right. Well, unfortunately, I think we're about to run out of time.